I discovered 3 terrifying true neighbor horror stories that shocked my small town. I never should have opened that door. The one under the eaves, almost hidden by shadows. Curiosity got the better of me. In my small town, life was quiet. Mornings were filled with the smell of coffee and the sound of birds. It was peaceful, until I heard the whispers. They came from the house next door. An old couple lived there. Strange, but harmless, or so I thought. One day, I saw the wife standing by the window. Her eyes were wide, scanning the street, as if she waited for something. Or someone. I glanced away, dismissing it as nothing. But then I saw it again. Every time I passed, she was there, staring. My heart raced. And then there was the man across the street. He never left his home. Just stood on the porch, shrouded in darkness. The air chilled around him. A smell of decay lingered in the yard. My gut twisted. Something was wrong. I couldn't shake off the feeling. Then came the barking. Every night, relentless. The sound of something clawing at the walls. I heard it echo through the town. Others noticed too. Eyes darting, whispers spreading like wildfire. "Did you hear what happened at the Wilsons?" they said. They found something in their basement. Something scuttled across the floorboards in the dead of night. A thud. My heart drummed loudly. I tiptoed around my home, every creak of the floor amplifying my fear. What was that? A cold breeze wrapped around me, sending chills down my spine. And then, silence. The kind that suffocates. No dogs, no whispers. Just a heavy weight. I dared to glance outside. The shapes of shadows danced under the moonlight. My breath caught as I saw her Mrs. Wilson standing on her lawn, her eyes black as coal. What was she waiting for? I felt panic rise like bile in my throat. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. I froze. My heart thundered. I shouldn't have opened that door. What was lurking behind it? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I stood frozen, my breath hitching as the realization washed over me. The door that had slammed shut was no ordinary door, it was the threshold to possibility and horror, a barrier between me and whatever lay lurking beyond. Every instinct told me to flee, but my feet refused to budge, rooted in place by a mixture of terror and morbid curiosity. Mrs. Wilson's figure on the lawn was a silhouette of malevolence. Her head tilted unnaturally, revealing the stark outline of her jaw, showing too many teeth for her frail frame. I wanted to scream, but even the spectral shadows outside seemed to hush any sound I might have made. The wind held its breath. I fumbled for my phone. The dim glow of the screen was a fragile beacon of safety, but as I turned, I heard it again, a soft scuttling noise beneath the floor, creeping closer, pulsating with the rhythmic beat of my heart. I pressed my ear to the floor, praying for some sign of sanity in this hellish reality. Instead, what I felt was a deep vibrating murmur, as if something below was aware of my fear and was echoing it back at me. The dusty window behind me rattled as I tore my eyes from the darkness of the yard, my heart sinking further as I heard the faintest whispers. They came again, clearer this time, a chilling harmony of cries and laughter, children's voices mingling with the guttural growls of beasts. It was a song of despair that floated up from the basement, beckoning me with promises of revelation and horror. I edged closer to the door, reaching for the knob, my cowardice raging against an inexplicable need for the truth. Just before I could grasp it, the wood suddenly groaned, its grain shifting as if it were alive. A grotesque hissing sound burst through the silence, like 100 voices trapped in torment, gnashing against the veneer of wood. My pulse quickened. I could almost see the tendrils of darkness creeping under the door, slithering toward me, tasting the air with icy breath. That twisted melody from below spurred me on. Come play with us, we are waiting. With a panicked surge of adrenaline, I yanked the door wide open. It creaked and moaned in protest, the ground beneath me dying away into an impossibly dark void. Peering into the abyss below, I felt the air thicken around me, pressing in as if it wanted me to plunge without hesitation. Then I saw its something glinting, the reflection of eyes, mismatched and darting in the darkness. It was not only creatures that dwelled beneath my house. Shapes emerged, ghostly figures of anguished children, their faces twisted in eternal fear, standing frozen in the shadows. Each one turned to look at me, their silent screams echoing through the very fabric of reality, begging for release, and then the floor above me trembled as heavy footsteps approached, the weight of something massive shaking the house to its foundation. The last figures behind them were not children but skeletal, elongated limbs dragging the ground, morphed into grotesque replicas of humanity. Sudden madness consumed me as I staggered back, tripping, landing hard on the floor. From the void, a voice broke through, deep and resonant, "You shouldn't have opened that door." The shadows lunged, stretching and contorting, reaching out for me. That I scrambled to my feet, my chest tight with horror as the last lingering remnants of Mrs. Wilson's silhouette slipped inside my home, stepping over the threshold as if it were an invitation. My world spun with panic as I stumbled, attempting to grasp reality in the overwhelming chaos, but right before I could escape, I felt a cold grip around my ankle, pulling me back into the horrors of the night. And as I turned, I met the black gaze of Mrs. Wilson, her smile wide as the abyss, her true nature spilling beyond the skin, too horrifying to comprehend. "Welcome home," she whispered. And in that haunting moment, I knew my escape was never in the cards. Something unspeakable awaited me, lurking just beyond the edge of sanity, and with one shuddering breath, I fell into the darkness. The darkness swallowed me whole, an oppressive weight that pressed down on my chest, suffocating any rational thought. Everything caught in my mind echoed children's laughter, anguished cries, and the soft, slithering whispers of the horrors that lay below. My heart raced, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the basement, as Mrs. Wilson's presence almost fused with the shadows that engulfed me. The grip on my ankle tightened, icy fingers creeping up my leg like vines, squeezing with an unnatural force. My panic surged, electrifying every nerve as I fought against an invisible force that wanted nothing more than to pull me into that infernal abyss. I twisted and turned, clawing at the ground, desperately searching for anything solid to hold on to. "Help me!" I screamed, but the sound evaporated into the stillness, swallowed whole by the thick air. Mrs. Wilson's cold breath filled my ear, the stench of decay flooding my senses as she leaned closer, her excited whispers mingling with the echoing cries of the children. "You could play with them, you know. They're so lonely, just one Moreno. Please." I gasped, dragging my fingernails across the floor in an instinctual bid for freedom. But my pleas were met with a chorus of laughter, an agonized symphony that rang from the chasm below, where the glowing eyes stared hungrily from the veil of darkness. With one final desperate surge, I kicked free from my tormentor's grasp, my body propelled backwards, crashing into the wall with a heavy thud. The shadows recoiled, a momentary ebb that left me gasping for air, my chest heaving in desperate breaths. The floor beneath me pulsed like a living heartbeat, thrumming with an unsettling energy that felt vibrantly alive, taunting me. As I steadied myself, the scene before me shifted. The living room had changed, the walls pulsated with an undulating darkness, as if a living fluid coursed through them, and the air grew thick with palpable dread. The once familiar space was now distorted, the furniture twisting and etching grotesque patterns in shadows. I could feel something watching me, something ancient and hungering. Suddenly, a chilling wind swept through the room, carrying with it faint echoes of conversations, secrets whispered among the grass of the yard outside. I turned toward the window, heart pounding as the curtains billowed out like ghostly wings. The shapes I had seen before were now flitting in the corner of my vision, figures darting like flickers of light soaked in darkness, their laughter weaving through the air like a spell, drawing me back to the window's edge. The garden appeared alien, twisted into eerie topiaries and shadowed recesses. Where there were once familiar flower beds now lay a spread of darkness, churning, shifting a vortex of twisted roots and earth that seemed to scream silently against the night sky. The figures of the children lingered, just outside the glass, their hollow eyes glistening with something unspeakable. As they reached out with skeletal hands, I could see their mouths shaped into silent wails, a desperate plea for salvation. "Join us, replace her," they intoned, their voices bleeding into one another, forming a cacophony that shattered any remnants of my courage. As Mrs. Wilson's form wavered, I noticed a shadow far darker than the rest, emerging from behind her. It drew closer, obscured by the shifting light, its outline brittle yet curiously alluring, but there was a splinter of malevolence in its form, sharp angles where human features should blend. I felt an electric fear race through me as I realized what it was, the manifestation of all the anguish, the misfortunes housed within these walls. In that moment, an unfathomable dread clawed at my insides, an instinctive warning ringing through my mind, screaming that I needed to leave before the horror enveloped me entirely, but my legs felt heavy, my body betraying me as twisted voices slithered into my ears, beckoning with promises sweeter than honey coated in venom. Just as I was poised to break free from the enchantment, the floor erupted into chaos as a surge of broken limbs and sorrowful eyes erupted from the depths, rising like a flood, pouring over Mrs. Wilson themselves, twisting and pleading for release. But before I could discern my next move, the familiar voice of my mother rang clear, calling my name from downstairs. I turned, my heart fluttering in hope, echoing off the walls. "Help!" I shrieked again, racing for the door that felt miles away, grappling with the shadows reaching for me, but as I reached out, I could feel the presence coalescing behind me. Whether it was Mrs. Wilson or something far worse, I couldn't tell. "You cannot run from who you are," it hissed, as darkness closed around me, the door slamming shut as the room began to twist, contorting and threatening to swallow me alive. And then, just outside, the front door creaked open. The figure of a child appeared in the frame, a familiar silhouette, drenched in the light of the porch, casting a long shadow that reached toward me with skeletal hands. "Come back, we have been waiting for you." The last thing I heard was the door latching ominously behind me as an unfathomable scream broke through the stillness of the night. The light from the porch flickered, every pulse a reminder of the salvation I had longed for. My instincts screamed at me to run, yet part of me felt an overwhelming magnetism pulling me towards that spectral figure. The shadow stretched, morphing sinisterly as it stepped forward, illuminating the twisted features of a child I once knew. "Oliver, my childhood friend." "Oliver?" I whispered, dread tightening around my throat. "What are you doing here?" His smile was unnaturally wide, a rictus that grinned from ear to ear, stretching the skin unnaturally. Behind him, the night swallowed the yard, a deepening abyss filled with the echoes of laughter and sorrow, creating a dissonance that crawled beneath my skin. "Come play with us," he called, twinkling in the dim light with an enthusiasm that sent chills racing down my spine. "We've all been waiting for you. They're so sad, so lonely." As he spoke, the shadows began to throb with life, swirling as if they were boiling, swelling around him with every whispered word. My heart pounded. I could see the children now, an array of familiar faces twisted in agony. Amanda, David, and even little Lily, the girl who brought flowers every May. Their hollow eyes glimmered like pitiless wells, beckoning me to join their eternal game while the light from the porch flickered dimmer. "No!" I cried, stepping back, desperately probing my memory for the innocence we once shared, desperately trying to tether myself to that fading flame of safety. "You're not real. You can't be real." His laughter grew, a haunting melody, growing louder and louder until it became almost unbearable. The shadows behind him writhed, wriggling like worms beneath damp earth, and the figures began to leer and stretch, inching closer as they merged into a grotesque symmetry. "Why won't you come? We have so much fun together," Oliver insisted, brushing his hair back as a smear of darkness dripped from his fingertips, pooling at the base of the door like ink spilled from a shattered bottle. "You could be one of us, forever cheerful, forever playing, but first, you must join them." In that moment, the ground trembled, vibrating with hidden malevolence. I glimpsed Mrs. Wilson's form erupting from the floor, her mouth agape in an eternal scream, pulling the semblances of the children closer to her. "You'll never escape this family," she hissed, each word coated with the bitterness of contempt. "Join us, or suffer the consequences." The walls began to pulsate intensely, vibrating as if they were alive, the chaos encircling me. With every beat, every thrum, I felt my will flickering. The vibration sent a surge of despair through me, warping my thoughts. What if joining them was not an end, but a beginning? Suddenly, deep tremors rippled through the floor, drawing my gaze to the basement door, now slightly ajar, revealing a blackness that yawned wider than the night sky. I strained to hear the whispers rising from the depths, the anguished prayers of those who had once sought to escape. Names floated towards me like forgotten memories, a tapestry of loss woven into the very foundations of this cursed home. "Come, come and look," Oliver urged, his voice a melodic beckoning. "They want you to see you belong here. Don't you want to know them?" I could feel the pull of their darkness, urging me closer to the edge, the decision wrapping around me like a noose. Out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement caught my attention. Something lurked deeper within the shadows of the basement. A pair of glistening eyes, wider and more feral than the others, locked onto mine, igniting a primal fear beneath my skin. Someone was waiting down there, cloaked in the shadows, waiting for the moment I would surrender. The door behind me slammed shut with a resounding finality, the wind howling as if it too mourned the loss of my escape. I was trapped between visions of innocence twisted by despair, and the suffocating darkness that promised liberation if only I dared to take that final step. "Choose," they urged in unison, their voices melding into one chilling symphony, echoing in my mind louder than the thunderstorm rolling in overhead. "Choose, or we will choose for you," and in that instant, as the wind howled and shadows converged, something dark surged up from the depths of the basement, swelling beyond flesh and bone into something beyond comprehension, something that had been waiting eternally, seeking a vessel. That I felt my body betray me as the darkness surged forth, and the last thing I heard was an unholy shriek breaking free from the depths, resonating through the night as my fingers reached for something that could anchor me, something solid to hold on to before the shadows consumed me whole. The darkness embraced me like a shroud, suffocating and heavy, pulling at the very fabric of my being. I tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed by a cacophony of tortured cries that spiraled around me, a chorus of despair echoing from the depths of the abyss. My body felt detached from reality, floating in an ocean of anguish where each heartbeat sparked like a dying ember against the all-consuming shadow. The shadows whispered in my ears, 1,000 voices melding into a single voice dripping with malice. "We've been waiting for someone like you," it hissed, each word laced with a seductive promise. "Join us, and never feel pain again." The landscape around me began to shift, contorting and twisting as if I were inside a nightmare from which there was no awakening. Faces of loved ones morphed into grotesque parodies of themselves. Me parents wept sobs of despair that twisted into gleeful laughter, their faces grinning wide with horror. "Come home, darling," they called, their voices overlapping, drowning me in memories twisted beyond recognition. "We're all here." Desperate, I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block them out. I could feel something crude and sinewy ripple beneath my skin, clawing to break free, the darkness gnawing deep within me. "Let us in," the whispers begged, "and you will know true happiness." As I resisted, the world around me distorted further, the air thickening with the rancid scent of decay. I couldn't see, but the proximity of snapping branches told me the forest beyond the yard was alive with movement. Shapes flickered in the periphery, inhuman and restless, breaking into the clearing around me, constricting the space with an oppressive urgency. Then, a searing pain shot through my chest, a deep and savage ache that felt like a claw tearing into my soul. I stumbled backward, and without warning, the ground beneath me heaved, shifting violently as if waking from a long slumber. The basement door swung wide open with a monstrous creak, revealing a void deeper than the night, the kind of darkness that knew no end. In that chasm, flickering shadows stirred, and a low murmur ebbed like an undercurrent. At first, I thought they were my childhood friends, their ghastly faces twisted into derision. But then the breath of something far more sinister rolled out from the depths, slick and ravenous, tasting the air of despair. "Come play." Oliver's voice taunted, his form slowly melting into the night like wax under the heat of a flame, only to be replaced by silhouettes swarming, eager for my surrender. Each entity shimmered with a malignancy that stirred the deepest fears within me. We can be together again, forever. Just take one step, the ground roared again, shuddering violently as the silhouettes vibrated and twisted, contorting into snarling faces, cold and devoid of empathy. I bolted, grappling for breath as I dashed towards the porch, feeling the weight of the darkness reach out like clawed hands trying to drag me back. That's when I stumbled upon the wood pile, and something icy gripped my heart as I noticed the ground around it unmistakable pattern of small graves, each marked by decaying flowers, wilted and fragile, their colors leached away by time. I fell to my knees, the reality of what lingered in this cursed yard clawing through the echo of my memories, and the imprints of loss etched into every bloody footprint that had wandered too close. Before I could regain my senses, a shriek erupted from the basement. It was a sound pulled from the raw seams of terror, the voice distorted and primal as it warned me. They'll always come back for you. I spun around, my heart racing, and that's when I saw it, an enormous shape rising from the yawn of the basement behind Oliver's ghostly visage. It was immense, a shapeless mass of undulating shadows, eyes thousands in number yet all too familiar. Each of those hungry gazes locked onto mine, filled with a manic hunger that promised only despair and darkness. That I staggered to my feet, the rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins, urging me to flee. The porch light pulsed once more, flickering in desperate warning. But the shadows advanced, a symphony of whispers overwhelming me with promise of belonging, of joy in the eternal void if I just surrendered. The last vestiges of human thought fissured in my mind, devolving into chaos as the darkness traced its path closer, coiling around my legs with sinister intent. As I grasped for something to hold, something to tether me back to reality, I found my hand brushing against a cold piece of metal, Oliver's old toy, the one that had fallen into the abyss ages ago. That very moment, a blinding flash illuminated the night, a crack of thunder echoing in the distance that shook my soul. Shadows thrummed in anticipation, and with a shattering crack, the ground erupted open beneath me, spiraling me into a free fall of terror. As I plummeted, the world above dissolved into darkness, and the last thing I heard was the unholy echoes of laughter mingled with my own scream, swallowed by the void as I descended deeper into the abyss along with my childhood friends and something else, far more sinister, lurking in the depths below, waiting for me to arrive. The descent felt eternal, the void an expanse of choking blackness that swallowed the sound of my own heartbeat. Gravity twisted time, stretching every moment into agonizing familiarity. Vibrations coursed through the air, a chilling resonance that felt akin to a pulse, as if the abyss itself were alive, rhythmic and sentient, drawing me further into its maw. Finally, the pitch blackness began to shift, revealing the faintest outlines of a place unrecognizable yet hauntingly familiar. I landed hard on cold, damp earth, gasping as a wave of tangible dread washed over me. The air was thick with the scent of must and rot, overwhelming in its intensity. I was in the deep recess of an underground chamber, dimly lit by flickering torches that hung like specters, casting dancing shadows along the crumbling stone walls. My heart slammed against my ribs like a caged animal desperate for freedom. I pushed myself up, scanning my surroundings. The chamber was cavernous, an eerie silence prevailing, broken only by the sounds of my ragged breath echoing off the ancient walls. In the far corner stood a massive wooden door, adorned with rusted iron hinges, the grain of the wood twisted like tortured hands clawing for release. It was then that I noticed them figures etched along the stone, their faces contorted in expressions of unbridled terror. Were they warning me? Their hollow eyes seemed to track my every movement, dripping with despair as if they had once walked this path, only to succumb to the horrors that lurked beyond the threshold. As I inched closer to the door, a whisper slithered through the air, momentarily soothing yet filled with the menace of a serpent poised to strike. "You mustn't leave," it cooed, the sound slithering into my mind. "You belong here, as we do. Join us." An icy chill raced down my spine, freezing me in place. I twisted around, heart racing, meeting the gaze of the shadows. The same forms that had delighted in torment above ground now danced beyond the range of the flickering light, their movements jerky yet hypnotic, like marionettes struggling against unseen strings. Their laughter became a haunting melody echoing off the walls, drawing closer with every heartbeat. Determined not to succumb to their beckoning, I turned back toward the door, the pull of transparency whispering of unknown revelations on the other side. I pulled what little strength I had left and grasped the iron handle, only for the door to swing open with an ominous creak, revealing another abyss beyond. This one was swathed in an oppressive light that pulsed in rhythm with an unseen heart, glimmering with 1,000 pinprick stars, their light somehow betraying an unspeakable horror lingering on the periphery. What awaited me was not the escape I had yearned for. Instead, the sights before me froze the blood in my veins. An altar loomed in the center of the room, carved from onyx stone and smeared with dark stains that glimmered like fresh blood. Around it, faces twisted in silent screams emerged from the walls, trapped within sepulchres of anguish, a dreadful reminder of sacrifices made. Suddenly, a racking sob echoed through the cavern, hitching my breath in the back of my throat. I turned, my heart lunging in painful recognition. There, half-formed in the shadows, was the silhouette of my mother, her figure wreathed in darkness yet painfully familiar. "Help me," she begged, her voice fragile, a thread of despair weaving through the surrounding laughter. "Don't let them take you too," the echoes of time buckled in that moment. I was rooted to the spot, unable to discern the relative danger from the sorrow that cascaded through her words. Familiar yet foreign, her essence lingered like the lingering trace of perfume on a long-lost scarf, every ounce of her being pulled against the very darkness she now inhabited. "Join us." The shadows chanted, their chorus rising to an unsettling frenzy, creeping towards me like vaporous smoke. "You cannot help her. Embrace the abyss instead." "No," I shouted, a primal rage erupting within me, fueled by a momentary clarity that sparked and dimmed like the fading embers of a fire. I lunged toward the altar, driven by some instinct I couldn't name, reaching out toward the dark stains that shimmered like promises of escape. But just as my fingers brushed the cold stone, the figures coiled and surged from the darkness, reaching out as one, their claws elongated and ready to snatch me back into their wretched embrace. In that collective rush, I caught a glimpse of Oliver's face, his expression torn between anguish and anticipation. "Stay with us," he pleaded, eyes flickering with desperation, as the circle of shadows threatened to close around me completely. The light from the altar flared, illuminating the chamber, and I felt reality buckling beneath the weight of my decision. The last thing I heard before the shadows engulfed me was the sound of my mother's cries mingling with the unholy laughter of those I had once loved. A chorus of despair spiraled into madness as I felt the grasp of countless hands clutching at my spirit, pulling me toward the altar as the darkness began to consume the last remnants of my soul. "Join us," they whispered as I was inexorably drawn into the depths, my fate forever intertwined with those who had long been lost. The darkness swallowed me whole, erasing the last vestiges of light and hope as chilling cries morphed into whispers, words tangling around my thoughts like a noose. I felt my essence slipping, unraveling beneath the tidal wave of despair that surged through me, dragging me deeper into this realm of treachery. Then, with a gut-wrenching lurch, I was released, flung away into an ethereal plane that shimmered with the sickly glow of memories laid bare. Here, time folded upon itself, and I became a spectator in an otherworldly theater of horrors. Vignettes danced before my eyes, scenes of the forsaken, moments stained with regret. I saw Oliver, crumpled in grief, his face twisted in agony as he loomed over the altar. Behind him was the glow of torches and the shadows of grasping fingers clawing at the air, desperate to take hold of what they could never possess. The weight of their sorrow seemed to imprint upon me, a cruel reminder of the inevitability of despair. With every passing vision, dread coiled tighter around my heart, a vice that constricted with each horrifying sight. Faces I knew flashed before me, twisted in grotesque mockery of smiles and laughter. Friends who had long betrayed me, their truths riddled with malice, melded with those who had been taken. It was a gallery of betrayal and torment, all leading back to the altar where I could sense a pulsating energy heartbeat. "Feel it?" A voice hissed behind me, a soft caress that sent shivers racing through my spine. I turned to find nothing but a corridor of darkness between the fleeting glimpses of agony and mirth. This is the core of your horror. Everything you love will be lost amongst this eternal suffering. It's only a matter of time before you join us.no. I screamed, plunging back to the altar that seemed to beckon to me again with a magnetic force, the very center of this grotesque dimension, with a desperate effort, I wrenched myself from the memories that threatened to overpower my mind, clawing through shadows until my hand scraped against the altar's surface once more. But this time, the cold dark stains throbbed beneath my fingers, the pulsing rhythm syncing with the thrumming heart of this place. It was its own being, feeding on despair, and feeding me visions of my own tragic end. "Help me, even now, you can save me," my mother's voice whispered as if carried by the wind that danced through the chamber. The walls echoed her cries, taunting me with their insistence that it was too late. "Do not trust them, they will leave you hollow." That I hated the truth of her words, yet they tugged at my heart, an anchor of the past I couldn't sever. "I won't be like you," I screamed back at the shadows painting the edge of my vision, and they howled in furious laughter, their collective malice clinging to every syllable. "You already are," they echoed, each voice a cruel mimicry of the pain I had suffered. Just as the laughter reached its zenith, the room erupted into chaos. Whirling shadows spiraled into a frenzy, the air thick with despair, each figure attempting to grasp onto me with their ethereal hands, and I stumbled back toward the altar, where a misty portal shimmered in response to my fear. The whispers swelled into an unholy chorus, their tones pealing through the ethereal air, rising until they scraped against the limits of my sanity. I could sense their eagerness, their hunger. "Join us. You cannot escape your destiny." Unwilling to succumb, I lunged toward the faint glimmer of the portal, fighting against the mental onslaught that clawed at my psyche. As I plunged forward, I felt them pull me back, the crushing despair grasping at my being, seeking to tether me to the suffering that bound them. Then, out of the swirling darkness, I felt a familiar warmth flood through meth glow of hope. It surged, pushing against the shadows that sought to yank me back into the grasp of despair. The blessed light called my name. "You can fight. Don't let go." But even as I reached the threshold, sealing the remnants of my precious memories around me like a shield against the suffocating despair, I saw it, my mother emerging through the shadows, a spectral figure with the weight of eternity in her gaze. Her hand reached for me, trembling in desperation. "You mustn't leave me," my world fractured in a heartbeat, torn between the portal's beckoning light and her haunting plea. One promise of salvation, the other a chance to rescue the loves I had believed lost. As the pain of choice twisted my heart, the ground beneath me began to shatter, fissures snaking through the stone where the altar stood. All around, the laughter turned sinister, fraying at the edges, as everything began to fracture with my very essence caught in the thrumming web of fate. With one last glance, I understood some sacrifices could not be made without tremendous cost. The space around me buckled, the echoes louder, realigning with the chaos clenching at my soul, filled with shadows and desperation, and then darkness erupted as the ground beneath my feet disappeared entirely. A scream built in my throat as everything around me dissolved, and with the chilling realization that I had witnessed my family's choice made in the same haunted chambers, I plummeted into a wild, excruciating fall without end. The air was thick and clammy as I tumbled through the pitch-black abyss, each second stretching into infinity. My body spun, lost to the sensation of falling endlessly. Reality faded away, I became a mere whisper, a memory lingering on the edge of existence. But then, a sudden jolt yanked me from the void, as if the universe had bent just to reclaim me. I landed with a bone-jarring thud on cold, damp earth. A haze hung over my senses, and it took me a moment to comprehend where I was. I had been thrust into a forest, dense with gnarled trees that twisted upwards like contorted hands grasping for salvation. Weeds and brambles clung to my legs, and a thick mist curled around me, weaving through the undergrowth like a sinuous serpent. Shadows shifted furtively among the trunks, flickering in and out of sight, urging my heart to race. I drew a shaky breath, and the stench of decay assaulted my nostrils, earthy, wet, and sweet like rotting fruit. Above me, the trees groaned, their branches scraping together in a mournful tune that mirrored my own hopelessness. The tormented cries of lost souls mingled with the breeze, pulling at the edges of my sanity. Who had I become in this wretched place? Was I merely a vessel, a pawn in the relentless game of despair? Sudden rustling in the underbrush snapped my head around, and I froze, heart hammering. The shadows poured forth, taking shape-twisted figures with hollow eyes that shone like dying embers. Their fingers elongated grotesquely, scraping against the trunks of the trees, beckoning me with a predatory grace. They murmured my name, their voices a dissonant choir laced with malice. "Welcome, welcome, we've been waiting for you." I stumbled backward, dread flooding my veins as I recognized the spectral faces hidden within the mass, Oliver with a rictus of pain contorting his features, and then others acquaintances, friends turned foes, all caught in their eternal torment. Their once familiar gazes morphed into something grotesque, filled with accusation and insatiable hunger. "Join us," Oliver rasped, his voice echoing with despair. "We were lost, and now you can be too. Save yourself from the emptiness, you lied." I shouted, panic clawing at my throat. "You betrayed me." My words hung heavy in the air, the accusation tumbling back on me like a stone cast into the darkness. The trees swayed, their branches seemingly nodding in agreement, and the figures inched closer, shadows stretching toward me like a flood. "Together we suffer, together we thrive," they coalesced, voices blending into an unsettling symphony. In the midst of this gathering storm, I suddenly felt a tug-me mother's desperate essence surged within me, a warmth that glowed faintly against the surrounding decay. It filled me with longing, reminding me that I wasn't devoid of hope, I was thrumming with it. As I stretched my hand toward the spectral light, the shadows erupted in fury. "No. You cannot escape." They howled in unison, and I felt the pull of dread gripping my very soul, spiraling into their darkness. They rushed at me like a tidal wave, intentions clearly sinister. Just as I braced myself for the inevitable onslaught, the ground trembled violently, and a deafening roar split the oppressive air as if the forest itself had awakened in fury. The trunks of the trees splintered, and roots burst through the earth like a monstrous clawed hand reaching for me. Twisted bark grasped for my ankles, dragging me into the damp earth, the forest itself becoming a prison. I squirmed and kicked, fighting against the rage of nature, the unearthly figures now surrounding me, whispering conspiracies of my demise. "Join us." They stretched their decaying limbs, faces contorting into grotesque smirks. My heart raced, and I swung wildly at the nearest shadows, but it was as if my arms passed through them. My attempts were futile against such sickening resolve. The ground yielded beneath me, pulling me deeper, cold fingers entwining around my legs like chains, dragging me toward an unknown pit of despair that roared like a beast subdued but not for long. Just as I thought I would be swallowed whole, a flicker of fire ignited in my chest. The warmth was blinding as I thrust out my hands, fighting the darkness, grasping at the tendrils of hope, but just then, the whispers erupted into frenzied cries. High above, shadows convulsed in a cacophony, and suddenly, the figures released their hold, falling back as a silhouette broke through the fog, a cloaked presence with glistening eyes like daggers, observing me with an unnerving curiosity. It breathed, each word dripping in ancient knowledge, a sickening sweetness that made my skin crawl. "The choice has been made, your fate is in delicate balance. Will you fall, or will you rise?" Before I could reply, its form expanded, shrouding me in a dark haze, threatening to drag me back into that endless void where hope had long since died. The shadows quivered around me, and I felt myself torn between two worlds, the encroaching darkness and the fleeting light of hope. And then, as I felt the light flickering, about to extinguish for good, a blinding flash surged through the air around me, and I knew one final choice remained. The realization hit harder than any force I'd felt before, the truth crashing down like a thunderclap. But then, above the din, a voice rang clear, frozen in time, pulling me back ever so slightly. "Don't look away. Remember what you're fighting for." And in that moment, I understood it wasn't simply my life at stake. There would be so much more lost with my submission. I started to scream, a raw sound that echoed through the forest as the cloaked figure lunged forward, and I braced for whatever horror awaited me as reality shattered once more. The echoes of my scream fractured the air, causing the shadows to flinch as if my voice was a weapon. The cloaked figure hesitated, its eyes narrowing, revealing a glimmer of contempt. "You defy the inevitable, but inevitability has a way of finding you." With that, the swirling darkness engulfed me, plunging me back into an inescapable nightmare. I felt weightless, suspended in blackness, surrounded by whispers that trickled through my consciousness like poison. Fingers of fear danced up my spine as I remembered the faces of those gathered in torment, each one a ghost from a past I couldn't outrun. Their hollow eyes, remnants of lives lived in a world just beyond my grasp, clawed at my sanity, drawing it ever closer to the edge. Then I crashed into a clearing, and the moonlight broke free from the oppressive clouds, illuminating the forest with an ethereal glow. That momentary clarity, however, yielded only a glimpse of the horror yet to come. The trees loomed as gnarled specters under the haunting silver light, and suddenly I was alone again, the shadows retreating but not vanishing, waiting that I scanned the clearing desperately, hoping to find something, anything that could anchor me to reality. An ancient stone altar jutted from the earth, a monolith covered in unrecognizable symbols, pulsating with a sinister energy. The ethereal light focused there, drawing my gaze to the carvings that writhed and moaned, each symbol a twisted tale of despair. I instinctively reached out, fingers grazing the cool stone. In that instant, the whispers amplified, swirling around me like hungry wolves, each voice laced with an impossible urgency. "Release us," they begged, rasping in unison. "Become one with the void, only then can you know peace." The palpable dread clawed at my insides as phantom hands beckoned me closer. I stumbled backward, heart racing, desperate to escape their terrible allure. "No!" I shouted, the weight of shame and guilt surging through me, awakening a strength bubbling from deep within. I had to fight. They couldn't have meant it like this, yet as I turned to run, the eerie stillness shattered, the ground began to tremble beneath me, the roots of the forest awakening from their slumber with a bone-deep hunger. I felt the earth split, jagged fissures erupting in a cacophony, each crack releasing swirling black mist that writhed like serpents, hungry for flesh. Amidst the chaos, I caught a glimpse of the cloaked figure emerging from the shadows once more, its features obscured but its presence unmistakable. It gestured toward the altar with a motion that seemed to ripple through time. I could almost see flickers of past sacrifices illuminating the frayed edges of my memory, not merely lives extinguished, but the remnants of a town reduced to whispers on the air, wrapped in darkness and lost to despair. That I grasped my head in horror as memories surged, neighbors disappearing without a trace, odd occurrences whispered about like urban legends born from collective fear. I had stumbled into a nightmare disguised as reality, the reckoning for past sins echoing now amongst the trees. With desperation, I sprinted toward the jagged, moonlit path that led away from the altar, the shadows surging in close pursuit, but the cloaked figure laughed, a bone-chilling sound devoid of warmth. "You think you can outrun your fate?" it hissed, shadows slicing through the air, swirling faster, encircling me like a pack of wolves closing in for the kill. Gasping, I darted into the thick underbrush, limbs flailing, each breath sharper than the last. But the moment I glanced back, I saw the clearing consumed by darkness, the altar pulsating with blinding light as the figures returned to their places of agony, whispering, "Find us, save us, join us." My pulse quickened, and in that desperate moment, I made a choice. I turned back, intent on demanding answers, shouting into the void that threatened to swallow me whole. "What do you want from me?" The response resonated like thunder, echoing from the pine-scented depths. "You are not the first to seek truth in this cursed grove, nor will you be the last. But you have something we hunger for. Your decisions will become your inheritance," each step leading deeper into despair. The ground quaked violently, throwing me to my knees, splintering trees collapsing into what felt like an endless chasm. I felt the walls of reality bending, pulling me toward an inevitable reckoning. Time slowed as I saw their faces again, those I lost, watching me intently, mouths forming silent cries, hands reaching toward me, and then, as the darkness consumed the last glimmers of the moonlight, the cloaked figure drew closer, towering above me, its eyes glinting with a promise laced in dread. "The heart chooses poorly," it whispered, "but the spirits, they always demand a toll." Just then, a deafening roar erupted from the chasm, a colossal shape rising from its depths, something ancient and unspeakable. My heart stilled in my chest as I realized its form was that of terror itself, a primal force longing to claw free, and I was at the edge, at the precipice of it all. And then the figure lunged at me, claws reaching for my very soul, and the last thing I remember was the ground giving way beneath me, pulling me toward that gaping maw of despair. Before I was swallowed, a chilling familiar voice echoed in my mind like the fading remnants of a memory. "Keep looking, do not look away." I plunged into the dark, and just before the abyss consumed me entirely, I understood this was only the beginning. I woke in a haze, disoriented, my entire body trembling as though it had been ripped from one world to another. The air around me felt heavy, burdened by an unspeakable darkness that clung to my skin like a shroud. I sat up, my heart racing as I grasped the ground beneath me, cold, damp, and unsettling. Slowly, I scanned my surroundings. The forest had vanished into a murky expanse that stretched endlessly. All light had dimmed, replaced by an alarming gloom that felt alive with anticipation. "Where am I?" I whispered, dread pooling in the pit of my stomach. The ground resonated with an otherworldly pulse, echoing through the white noise around me like a heartbeat, the heartbeat of something ancient and insatiable. As I pushed myself to stand, I felt that pull again, a dull ache at the base of my skull, an urge to move forward despite the growing sense of imminent threat, and then I heard a faint whisper that drifted through the stagnant air, curling around me like the tendrils of a nightmare. My name. It lilted with an eerie familiarity that sent a shiver down my spine. "Come," it beckoned, coaxing me deeper into the unknown. "Join us." I halted, fear pooling within me as flashes of faces appeared in the shadows. Oliver, Amanda, David. They beckoned from nowhere, their hands extended, promising solace but also betrayal. The ground shifted beneath my feet, sending tremors through my body. I stumbled forward, heart pounding, every step exuding defiance as I moved towards the influence of that haunting call. The shadows swayed, elongating and twisting, teasing glimpses of their ghastly forms, faces contorted into expressions of plea and menace. I couldn't let them pull me into the abyss. I had to wake up from this dream, this living hell. As I inched deeper into the darkness, a faint light flickered in the distancia, beacon amidst the abyss, drawing me in with a mix of fear and hope. Each pulse of light resonated with my heartbeat, quickening, urging me onward through the inky blackness. With each step, memory bled into realism, a vast tapestry of sorrow, loss, and unearned guilt spiraling around me, laying bare the truth I had tried to escape. As I approached the glimmering light, it burst forth, illuminating a gaping entryway, a cave painted in luminescent streaks. Awash in its brilliance, I was met with an unsettling sight. A circle of figures stood in silent despair, all bearing familiar features yet distorted by grief and darkness. Each face reminded me of the neighbors from the small town I had once found solace in. But there was more. Each figure bore the unmistakable mark of anguish, their eyes crying unshed tears, their mouths whispering unheard pleas. "Mama," a voice broke the silence, and I spun around to find a child I hadn't noticed before standing behind me. It was Oliver's sister, Lily, clinging to a worn-out dolly, her eyes wide and glassy. "Help us!" As I took a cautious step closer, the figures merged, blurring before my eyes. "You must choose," they chorused, chanting like a well-rehearsed hymn, "join us, or suffer with us." That all-too-familiar pulse of abysmal dread wrapped around my heart, squeezing, threatening to pull me down further. I understood then this was their fate, to be intertwined in an endless spiral of suffering unless someone took their place. "No!" I shrieked, backing away, terror consuming me. "I want." But deep inside, layers of my own darkness unfurled, the guilt of survival, the echoes of parents who had mentored me with whispered legends of a haunted history still lingering like a shadow. I could not leave the family, my friends, those souls torn asunder. The shadows shrieked, their voices like shards of glass, cutting through the suffocating air. It was madness enveloped in the swirling night, desperate to pull me under. "Join us. They always come back." They wailed, their hands stretching, curling toward me like roots in desperate need of nurturing. The ground quaked violently, opening into deeper rifts, whispering tales of abandonment, betrayal, and a curse long maintained. I felt the bindings of fate tighten. "Stop!" I cried, the words clawing from my throat as my heart thudded in resistance. "I won't let you take me." The shadows writhed, laughter bubbling up like ash from a suffocated fire, engulfing the air with a thick veil of malevolence. They hungered for my surrender like vultures circling the weak. I had seen them linger around the edges of my consciousness, witnesses to my fears, ushering me deeper into despair at every chance. Rushing through the mixed smells of damp earth and decay, I stumbled into the illuminated arch of the cave, my breath quickening, desperation swelling like a tide. The silhouettes pressed close, then vanished into the darkness, their haunting whispers echoing still in my mind, a constant reminder of the choices I had to make. That it was a choice, but the cost felt unbearable. I had already sacrificed so much just to get here. I owed it to myself to break free, yet the ache of yearning tumbled within as I pushed past the light, crossing through the threshold toward the pulse that seemed to wait in anticipation. It was then that I caught sight of it, the altar of despair, an ancient stone slab smeared with the rusted remnants of sacrifice, adorned with ghostly carvings enshrined in madness. In its center lay an intricate glyph, pulsating rhythmically with power. I realized, with dawning horror, that I stood on the precipice of awakening something far worse than the shadows themselves. As I grasped the altar's cold stone in regret and desperation, I felt warmth flow through me, a familiar essence entwined in every fiber of my being. Delight twisted with despair as I called out, "I refuse to join you. You do not own me." My voice echoed louder, resilient against the cacophony closing in. But even as I shouted, resolute, the shadows erupted, dark tendrils wrapping around my arms, binding me to the sacred ground beneath. Heady laughter ricocheted around, and I knew all too well that evil had no intention of letting me go. "Look closer." They chanted, their voices pulsing like the heart of the cave. "You are already part of the darkness." Suddenly, the air thickened, I felt something inside me crystallizing, every breath becoming a struggle as I realized they were right. The darkness had seeped in, whispering poisonous truths, twisting the very fabric of my essence. The weight of realization clung to me. It wasn't merely about joining them, it was about battling against my own shadows, the reciprocation of choices made or unmade. As the altar began to tremble, the shadows lunged in unison, pressing against the brink of light, claws scraping at my arms. "Choose." Thudded through my head, the haunting becomes a growing chorus. Embrace the void. The light around me flickered erratically, shadows merging and colliding, howling for acceptance. My mind reeled as the shadows sought to pull me into their endless abyss. But instead of submitting, I felt a sudden surge rise within me. Fury and defiance ignited a strength I didn't know I had. I shouted louder, "No. I choose to fight." As the shadows shrieked and recoiled from my breath, something inside shifted. Images swirled in a vortex as wisdom from long-ignored lessons cracked open barriers of fear within me. Risk of losing everything was overshadowed only by the power of standing my ground. "Enough," I declared, and in that moment, the darkness rumbled, vibrating along with the altar. The looming trees threshed a reckoning against shadows that sought to consume, bending their will toward my strength. The light flurried 1,000 embers reflecting back through the cavernous depths, and hearts ignited at the hollows of twilight as the force cascaded through me. It surged as I pushed back, reaching forward, pulling the light into my chest. "I reclaim my soul. I will not be afraid." As my voice faded, the shadows melted back, recoiling as light burst from my core, banishing darkness with a powerful radiance. Expanding, increasing, exploding forth, the brilliance washed over the cavern like a cleansing tide, spreading through the shadows that had crept so closely, illuminating all that haunted my path. Twisted faces melted away into sparks of forgotten memory, and the air quivered with undeniable truth. The whispers grew distant, their haunting tones replaced with the memory of forgiveness. I felt an indescribable warmth and light spilling through the cracks of my soul, me mother's essence surging forth as a protective mantle wrapped around me, echoing the love I thought I lost. With my heart now untangled from dread, I shouted, knowing that even those who were lost could be liberated from the burden of despair. And just as I was about to reclaim my path, the last remnants of the shadows clung to the edge of my consciousness, whispering a final lingering promise. "But where will you run to? Nothing awaits beyond this place." Flashes of darkness writhed as cracks formed in the earth, promising freedom above and beckoning sweetly. I hesitated, my heartbeat resonating with the abyss, each moment teetering on the edge of reality and becoming one with darkness. Yet now, I understood at long last it was I who had the power. Those shadows were now proof of a journey lived, consequently reminding me that my will was my own. And, in that moment of reckoning, I whispered, "I will not fear what awaits me. I choose my path." The bright light enveloped me fully, lifting me above the trembling earth as shrieks echoed in twisted delight. I rose, leaving behind shadows burrowed deep, growing dimmer until they were nothing more than whispers on cool winds. A final rush of energy surged through me, and I felt warmth wrap me, embracing me in love rather than despair, guiding me forth toward the unknown, with the horror of my neighbors forgotten, the last echoes of their cries collapsing into silence, I resumed my journey toward hope. But even as I climbed toward the light, I couldn't shake the last voice that trailed behind, a final whisper that sent icy fingers creeping along my spine: you can never escape, the darkness will always await your return.